Welcome back to Primary Source China Investment. Peng.guo and I are here with show M4. And this week we wanted to talk a little bit about trade, because despite all of the bad news, trade continues. There's a famous quote that says there's nothing more powerful in the universe than compound interest. I would say the second most powerful thing in the universe is trade. So you could be confused if you thought years of COVID, trade war, South China Seas, spy balloons, and all other sorts of things would dampen trade between the two largest economies, but you'd be wrong. I mean, recall after the initial trade war started by Trump in 2018, that was on $300 billion worth of Chinese goods. And recall that was driven by the concerns over China trade policies and practices. The original purpose was lost afterwards because Beijing retaliated, hit US companies with $100 billion on products, and all of these duties still remain in the Biden administration 2 years later. But despite all of this talk of decoupling, China and the US trade continues to increase. And it increased $538 billion in 2022. So that is almost to the record set in 2018. So we're all the way back from pandemic. But the export of US goods to China hit a record in 2022 of $153 billion worth of goods. And we can get into some of those specifics, but I wanted to get Peng.guo's thoughts about trade in general, what he sees, and the macro view.
Firstly, I think the global trade is really the efficient market. So this right now, and a lot of the people get involved, and all the information is quite efficient. You can see there's a lot of like the opportunity pop up in a different area, but it's very hard to capture it. However, if you really want to form a business consistently to do to make the money on the trade, that would be very difficult. So a lot of the risk in the trade, especially global trade. And right now, in the last year, there's a lot of the geopolitical conflicts. So those conflicts definitely have the negative impact for the global trade. The problem is always hurt their original goal. So every country's goal is try to improve the entire society's wealth and try to control the inflation. But a lot of the actions is against this goal. From China perspective, they really worry about the global recession of the global economy, because that will just decrease the consumption. And a lot of like a political noise or something. So I don't think people to business, they worry about it, but they might not care too much about that.
Yeah, you have some of the issues with specifically on these bigger items like oil. People are using third-party countries. People are changing, importing from one place and then exporting from that place to the final destination. So, what do they say? Nature finds a way, trade finds a way. And one of the interesting things that people should remember here is the trade between the US and China is slightly different. US imports a lot of finished goods from China. Think electronics, toys, those kind of items are what the US imports. But what does the US export to China? And a lot of that is agricultural products. So while the US may say, well, we're going to make our iPhones in Vietnam, China can't necessarily say, oh, we're going to buy our corn from somewhere else, because it's just not grown there. So there is some advantage, if you will, for the US side, because in the press, we keep hearing, oh, we want to change our supply chain. We want to make sure that we're not dependent on China. That's a little bit easier with finished goods. If you look at Vietnam, for example, Vietnam had a huge increase in two-way trade between the US and Vietnam, more than tripled in the last 10 years. And a lot of that is finished goods as well.
I agree. So people have a lot of the concerns, especially the recent Ukraine and the Russian war, and also affected the global supply chain. And so they try to make everything be more safe and be more reliable. Unfortunately, a lot of things you have to follow the market and the economy, the principles. You cannot just do whatever you want. And I think most of the government, they try to just, even the companies, they try to think about how to survive in the next quarter. in this year.
Sometimes
So
it's not
what
so
their
strategic.
plan,
Yeah.
what their effort, they really have no idea about how much effort they need to do, how much cost they want to do, they have to pay, and how long they need to do that. They just raise the political, try to attract the people to get some kind of support. And for the execution plan, it doesn't match, and it doesn't and then have no own like the roadmap, step by step to their goal.
Well, the headline here, though, is trade is going to change, but it doesn't necessarily go away. One of the areas that's important to remember when we're looking at this are the US manufacturers or foreign manufacturers building products locally in China for the local market. Think of Tesla, Cummins, even Tupperware. You're building in China for a China market, and you're going to see a lot more than that. Conversely, you don't see a lot of Chinese companies coming to the US and building factories. We're hearing some of that in Mexico now, but if you recall, former President Obama produced a documentary called American Factory. So you don't have a lot of the inverse happening. You do have a lot of US firms building factories in China, maybe other places now, but certainly for the local market. It's no longer, I'm just going to go build a factory there and export back. So the nature of trade is changing, but it is not going away. And that we can see in the numbers. I think that's the important takeaway today.
Yeah, that is a great game. So people have to figure out and reach kind of the balance to I think still follow the basic things and like the Tesla, so they can build it in the United States, they can also build it in Europe as well as in China. The only question would be which place would be the best one. So they might still have the options either in all three places or maybe focus in one place or maybe adjust it. That's always a dynamic change. But I think the bottom line is it looks like if you really want to make money and reach the growth, you have to add the more innovation and increase the value or complexity to beat the other competitors. Otherwise, if just purely just build some kind of stuff, it's not reach the economic of the scale, but that's not be consistent for the long time. It's really needed the sustainable growth.
Well, McKinsey has made billions on consulting on this exact concept. Should I be close to my customer? Should I be a low-cost provider? All of these things go into the mix. But if you're talking about, Tesla or Cummins, I think Cummins is a better example because it's something people are a little less familiar with. But they build big machines for agricultural and they build engines for automobiles. So it's probably best to be closest to your customers. So where is your customer? And if you have customers in Europe, well, maybe a factory in Europe makes sense, and China it makes sense, and in the US it makes sense. So, this is what's happening. There's no longer, oh, I'm just going to go whole hog into producing somewhere else, but have no clients there. That probably doesn't make any sense going forward. So strategically, companies are thinking about this, like, where is my customer? How do I serve my customer? And I think that's probably the best answer. No longer is it, oh, where can I just get cheap labor, cheap land? Because once I have that,
yeah.
I don't, yeah, I mean, that's the only advantage I have. I have no customers there. Well, that's probably not a great business model.
Always follow the market because the market will tell you immediately.
Correct.
The financial statement is make money or lose.
That's right. So,
That's
and then back to your point, you have to make a superior product or provide a superior service or have a better operational management. You have to be a leader in one of those areas. Otherwise, you're just not going to make it. So,
yeah, all those efforts actually benefit the consumers. So they do get the value from the kind of the competition. So the bottom line is, should we really keep the negative or positive competition in the global trade?
And the competition absolutely is global, and they're competing on all of these things. They're competing on technology, they're competing on innovation, they're competing on operations, and they're competing on customer service. So all of these things, and you have to tailor your product and service locally. So I think we're going to leave it there with show M4. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the great weather, and whoever your choice is for the Super Bowl, go.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoy.